Hello and welcome to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I'm sitting in front of my movie corner. I have my Gettysburg Paranormal Extreme Ghost Hunting DVD right here. I'm wearing a Batman t-shirt, mostly because today I'm going to be talking about the paranormal, the supernatural, and how it relates to Christians around the world. Okay? Because I hear a lot of people, both Christians and atheists, say there's no such thing as supernatural, there's no such thing as the paranormal, ghosts don't exist. So I'm going to share some of my experiences, and then I'm going to talk about some things out of the Bible, some passages where the Lord, either Jesus or God or a prophet, kind of pulled back the curtain and was like, dude, look, see? There are things beyond what we can see. Okay? Jesus did this a lot. Okay? He would pull back that curtain and be like, see guys, see, there's a ton of stuff over here. So I'm going to start with Whitman Mission. Okay? When I was, I would have to say, I think I was about 12 years old. Okay. I was in a private Catholic school, and went to the Whitman Mission in southeastern Washington State. Okay, it was a field trip that we took, and went down there. It was fascinating to look at because the visitor center had like the whole story, it had pictures and paintings and different things. So you could walk around and you could see, what was going on at the time, and because they kind of place it within the context of how the Native Americans viewed the white man as they were coming out west, and because they had never had the diseases that we had in Europe, like smallpox and those kind of things, they started having issues. And the Whitmans, Marcus and Narcissa Whitman, came out to the west, and they set up a mission, and they had some Native Americans working there. They had some other missionaries, white missionaries with them, who were just there, and they were trying to provide relief for the nearby tribes. They were giving them blankets, they were giving them medicine, they were trying to help them. And the Indians thought that they were part of the problem. And so they attacked the mission where they were and killed everybody. Okay. And the army came in and basically smashed them, and that was, and then they, there was some fighting that went on there, and then there were some other events that happened. But because it's part of the history of where I live, they took us down there to see the mission. And what they did is they went out and they put in this field down below the visitors center, they put little bricks to mark out where the buildings used to sit. And I'd been up in the visitors center all day, and some people were like, hey, have you been down to the field? I'm like, what field? And they're like, well, you go out there and you go down these little steps and you'll see this grass field, and there's like some bricks there that show the building. You should go down there. I'm like, all right. And so I went out the back of the visitors center and I walked down into the place, and as I walked down into the lower area where the buildings used to sit, as I crossed over one of the brick lines that denotes where the buildings used to be, I suddenly stopped because I started seeing two different worlds. I was in present day, but I was also in the time of the Whitmans. Okay, I could see the people walking between the buildings, carrying on about their day. Okay, And this is something that is a phenomenon that I think a lot of paranormal investigators will tell you about. If you watch something like Ghost Hunters or Ghost Adventures, they talk about this a lot. There's especially battlefields, sites where people die violently. There's a lot of issues. There's something where the blood soaks into the land and it kind of creates psychic events. And there were parts where I could actually feel some of the people walk through me, okay, as they went. And I'll talk about why that is here in a minute, but I just kind of wanted to mention this first because I did not know at the time what happened to me. And I had a friend of mine who was in the same class. He walked up and kind of tapped me on the shoulder and was kind of like, huh? And he was like, hey, man, what's up? I'm like, nothing, man. And he's like, this is pretty cool. We walked around for a little bit. We got back on the bus, we went back home. And then sometime later, about, I don't know, like a month or two later after this, was over at my friend's house for the evening. We were just kind of sitting there. We were having fun. And he goes, and we got onto the subject of the Whitman mission. And I suddenly just kind of blurted out to him. I said, I saw, like, I was in, like, I could see the people walking around the Whitmans and their people that were at the mission. I could see them walking around. And my friend goes, that's weird, because I could too. And, like, we could see that stuff. And that was kind of the first time that I really had any sort of paranormal experience in my life. Won't be the last, but it would be something that I really kind of, like, saw for the first time. And like I said, I didn't know what happened back then. I know what happened now. And I'll get to that in a bit. But it was something that really profoundly changed me, okay? Because once I started watching some of the shows like Ghost Adventures, Ghost Hunters, those kind of shows, you start to understand what they do, and you can kind of like empathize with someone, okay, about what happened, about what was going on. And it was like crazy what they started describing, and I'm sitting there looking back on my own paranormal experiences and going, whoa, okay, I have that similar experience at a different place, but I've had a similar experience to that. And so the next one that I had was my mom and dad separated when I was about 16. And I believe when I was 17, because a lot of that stuff is a blur for me. When I was about 17, my dad came in, he goes, hey, you can go with your mom down to California, you can go with me down to El Paso, Texas, and visit your aunt and uncle, or you can go down and visit grandma and grandpa. And I was like, well, I'm going to go with mom, and because my mom and I kind of talked about it, and I was going to go to Disneyland, because when we went to Disneyland the first time, I was too young to ride a lot of the rides, I was too small to ride a lot of the rides, so I wanted to go back, and I wanted to ride some of the rides now that I was a little older. While we were down there, my mom took me down to San Diego, and we went to the Hotel del Coronado, because my grandparents used to live in San Marcos, which is just east of Oceanside, a little ways, right about where Escondido lives, and then to the north is where Los Angeles metropolitan area is, and to the south is where the San Diego metropolitan area is. So we drove down into downtown San Diego, and we went to the Hotel del Coronado right on the beach. If you've seen a lot of movies where they feature San Diego, especially some of the older movies, you can see the Hotel del Coronado featured quite prominently. It's a very famous hotel. on the top of it has this little rotunda. So you got like 4 or 5 levels of the hotel, and then on the top of it, you have this rotunda, which gives you like a 360-degree view of the beach, because you kind of get up and over some of the lower buildings that are around the beach, so you can get really nice view of San Diego, kind of the beach area of San Diego. So we went into the hotel, and my mom hadn't been there in a long time, so she walks up to the front desk. She goes, "We're looking for the staircase to get up to the rotunda." And the lady says, "Well, you go straight down here, and it's the first one on the right." And, okay, so we walked, and we started going up, and we were on the 3rd floor heading up the staircase to the 4th floor. Okay, so the staircases were like this, right? You'd walk up from the 2nd floor, and then you'd walk around, and then you'd walk up the 3rd floor, you'd walk around, you'd walk up the 4th floor. So the staircases were kind of stacked like this. And as we were walking up, and there's about, that much space, and it kind of goes down as it goes, it's like starts way big, and then it kind of goes down as you go up. I was about a third to almost a half of the way up the staircase, and my mom was a little bit ahead of me, so she didn't see this, but out of the corner of my eye, kind of, not even really the corner, but about 45 degrees, so not the corner, not at like 90 where it's like over here, but it was about 45 because I'm walking up the stairs. I see this pair of legs walking down, and then it turns and walks into one of the doors. And I didn't hear anybody below us walking up or talking or anything, because you can hear the footsteps as you're walking up the stairs, right? They're carpeted stairs, but they're old wooden steps. And so when and the carpet's not like real thick. There's not a real thick pad. It's just it's more like just a layer of carpet. So you get that kind of as you walk up the stairs. And I didn't hear anybody walking up the stairs. And there wasn't anybody behind us when we were coming up. So there wasn't anybody following us up the stairs. Okay? So I waited for a second. I waited for about 10 seconds to see if I could hear a door close. I didn't hear a door close. And I stood there, and my mom finally realized, she was almost to the top. She realized I wasn't right behind her, and I had stopped. And she stopped. She turned around. She was like, "What?" And I said, "I don't know." It's okay. So I walked on up the stairs. We went on up to the rotunda. We looked around, took some pictures, came back down, and we went to the gift shop. And I made an immediate beeline for the book section. And they had a little book, and it kind of was like a little pamphlet. I'm trying to find... It was kind of like a thicker version of this, okay? Where you'd open it up, and it had kind of a stiffer cover, okay, like a stiffer card stock, but it was like this, just a little bit thicker, okay? And it was called Ghosts of the Hotel del Coronado. So I was thinking, I'm going to try to find and see if there's something in here similar to what I experienced. And there actually was. There was, people had reported on either the 3rd or the 4th floor seeing legs walking down the hall. Now, at the time, there were a few people in the gift shop, including my mom and I, and this was right next to the counter, so the counter was on my right-hand side. And there was the guy that runs the register right there, and because there wasn't anybody there, he turned to the side because he saw me there, saw what book I had in my hand, and he was like, "Did you see something?" And I'm like, "You're going to think I'm crazy." And he goes, "Try me." So I told him what I saw, and he goes, "We've had a lot of people report that. You're not the only one, trust me. Okay, you're not the only one. We've had a lot of people report this." I was like, wow, that is freaking crazy, man. Because I said, you've got the closing doors, right? You have the little springs on the doors that make them close automatically. He goes, "Yes, we do." And I said, well, I stood there for about 20, 30 seconds waiting to hear if I could see something or, hear something, even from down the hall, but I know I saw it go into a door about 3 or 4 down. Okay? Because I could actually see it disappear into a doorway. And I didn't hear a door close. And he goes, "Yeah, we've heard that a lot in this hotel." Okay, especially on that main staircase, especially when people are walking up, they'll see it, and as soon as they try to look at it, it turns and disappears into a room. Almost like it knows you're looking for it. It's crazy. And I was like, yeah, that is nuts. I was not expecting that at all when I went to that hotel. Okay? I mean, a lot of people would say hotels, naturally creepy places, just because you've got those long hallways, there's a lot of silence, because the doors are fairly thick, so they block out a lot of the sound unless you're standing almost right in front of the door. So, and sometimes people end their lives in hotels. It happens. Okay. In fact, when the Ghost Adventures crew went to the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado, which inspired Stephen King to write The Shining, in the carriage house, the old carriage house, which is when people would come up in their horse-drawn carriages, they would store the carriages in this one area, and they would just back it in. They would close the doors, and then they had a little pen behind it that is now gone. But they used to be that they had a pen behind it that they would put the horses in. Okay, and then they could feed the horses. They give them blankets, and they do all that kind of stuff. And then they also had a place for the horses to come in if it was wintertime. And or if it was getting towards winter and it was cold outside, they could bring them inside the carriage house next to the carriage that they were in. And in that carriage house was the death mattresses. And that carriage house is notoriously haunted. In fact, when they take out one of these mattresses that people have died on and they take them out and they stick them in there, even the staff hate going in there. And like while the guys were there and they explored the carriage house, they actually had to talk a person into getting into the carriage house because it was they were like, I'm not comfortable with this. It's freaking nuts. So that was kind of my second brush with the paranormal, and both of these events have been very benign. Okay, nothing too crazy. Okay, just me seeing things out of the corner of my eye, or me kind of almost like I'm standing in two places at once, and two times at once. Okay, in the same spot. And so, in 2004, I'd watched Ghost Hunters a few times. Wasn't too impressed with them, especially when Grant left, because Jason and Grant started TAPS together because they worked at Roto-Rooter, and they had both had paranormal experiences. So they started TAPS as a way to kind of say, we're trying to help people understand that, yes, these things happen. Yes, we understand that these things happen. We want to help you understand. When they got the contract from Sci-Fi Channel to go out and do these ghost hunts, at times the camera people would be told by the producer in their ear as they're holding the camera and they're walking around to knock on walls, to pull things off shelves, just to try to spice things up to capture activity. And I thought that was very dishonest. So I stopped watching them for a while. And when I started watching the Travel Channel a lot. And in, I think it was like 2004 or 2005, they aired this documentary called Ghost Adventures. And it featured these three guys. There was Zach Bagans, there was Nick Groff, and there was Aaron Goodwin. Okay? And it was just the three of them trying to find out if they could find any paranormal evidence. And what they found in that original documentary, and I challenge anyone to go on to... you can't find it on YouTube anymore. They used to have it on YouTube. You can find clips from it on YouTube, but you can't find the whole documentary. And I recommend getting the whole documentary, watching the whole documentary. It will change your life. Because what they caught can't be faked. Okay? It can't. They even went to video analysts to prove the authenticity of it. Okay? And it kind of like charged me because I realized that I wasn't alone in this. When I went to college in Ellensburg, Washington. There's a college there called Central Washington University. And it started out as a state normal school. And what that meant is that it was controlled. The state was paying money, but it was kind of controlled by nuns and by women to create, because this was back in like the 1800s, before they had public education. They were training teachers to go out and start schoolhouses, okay, to train people in how to read and write and math and all that kind of stuff. And it eventually, when Washington became a state, they had to choose where the capital was going to be. And then came down to two cities. There was Olympia and there was Ellensburg. And we all know where it went. Olympia. So Ellensburg got the College of Central Washington University. So they took over the old state normal school and they put up some more buildings and they put up some dorms and they started a college called Central Washington University. Okay? Go Wildcats. And so I was there for 2 years. And before that, my brother was there for 5. He'd had some issues and he ended up going about 5 years in college. And because we both graduated the same time from high school. We were 4.5 years apart, and he was supposed to graduate. He graduated in 94. I entered high school in 94. I was supposed to graduate in 98. I graduated in 99. And he was supposed to graduate in 98. He graduated in 99. We actually graduated on the same day, 3 hours apart. He was at like 10 o'clock, or actually I guess it was 6 hours apart. He was like 10 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock in the morning. I was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So I remember we went up there, we waited, his name was called, my dad and I jumped in the car, we drove 2 hours home, and he dropped me off. I got dressed in my gown and went down, and I got dressed and went out and did mine, my graduation. So while I was there with my brother, there were always talk of these 2 halls, and I don't remember the name of the other one, but the one hall that was famous was known as Comola Hall. And anyone who's been to Central Washington University knows the story of Lola from Comola. Okay? And the story goes that there was this woman named Lola, and this is an urban legend, guys. I don't know if this is true. I didn't do any research on it. This is just my experience, okay? And somebody could probably write down in the comments, yeah, this story is totally fake. It probably is. Okay? But supposedly there was a woman who hung herself in the top room of the hall, and they don't rent that room anymore. Okay, it stays permanently locked. They don't rent it. Okay, and because like I guess they rented it once to a guy who ended up killing himself in a similar fashion, like he either hung himself or slit his wrist or something. Okay, and so they just permanently lock the door and nobody goes in there. And that's just that one room. The hall usually has students in it. Okay, these 2 halls. And every time I went down to the south end of campus, because there's Barge Hall, which was the original state normal school, and then there's like a couple of halls, and then I want to say it's Comola Hall, and then there's the 2 halls. There's Comola, and then there's the other one, and then there's a long hall called Lind Hall, which is the science building, which is where you do geology and astronomy and those kind of sciences. I think they even have like chemistry and stuff in there too. Because when we had the earthquake in Seattle in 2001, I believe it was, like we felt it in Ellensburg. And like as I was walking down to my English class, I'd stopped and talked to a friend on my way down to English class because he was coming back from one of his early morning classes. And we were standing there talking, and like I was like shifting sideways, and I'm like, "What the hell is?" And then I shifted the other way. I'm like, "What the hell was that?" And as I was walking down to class, I saw all these guys like booking it south, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they're like, "Earthquake," and I'm like, "No way." and I went up into my English hall, and there was actually a crack in the building. And some of the faculty came in and they said, everybody go back to your dorms. This building has some cracks in it. We need some inspectors to come out and take a look at it. Classes are canceled for the rest of the day for any English class. Let all your friends know if they have any English classes, they're not coming to class today. We've sent out some emails to all the students, but just tell them so that if they don't get their emails, because this was in the time before you had regular email at your dorm. Like we hadn't yet gotten that together. And so not everybody had internet in their room. We still had internet room, we still had rooms with computers where people would come in and check their email, write papers, do all that kind of stuff. Computers were becoming more popular at that time. But they had just gotten in like T1 connections. I mean, we were one of the last colleges in Washington State to get T1 connections there. But anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that every time I went down to the south end of campus and I went by Comola Hall, these two halls, okay, I could feel like somebody was standing, because there was 3 windows at the top. Like somebody was standing in that center window, like looking at me like. You know how you get that feeling like you're in a party or you're in a crowded room and you feel like somebody has their eyes on you, and when you look around, like you don't really notice anybody like hard staring at you, but it feels like there's somebody hard staring at you? That's the feeling I got every time I went by that hall. Okay? So there's definitely something there. I don't know what it is, but there's definitely something there. And I'll explain that here in a second. Like I said, it's something that's a little bit more complex, needs a little bit more setup. Because watching Ghost Adventures, and to a limited extent Ghost Hunters before it, they were mentioning that they use EMF detectors, okay? Electromagnetic field detectors. It's a box, and basically you hold it up and it has a little meter on it, and you move it around, and when you get a thing, a needle spikes or display goes up and down. And sometimes it'll have an antenna on it, sometimes it's just a box, but they just do this kind of a thing, and they try to get readings. And so I was looking at how was this going to work, like, and I was trying to figure out what they were doing, and they would always say, like, whenever they had somebody start complaining about being in a place, feeling paranoid, feeling like somebody was watching them, feeling like, and then if they were in a space for a prolonged period of time, they would start to feel nauseous. They would start to feel paranoid, and they would go into an area and they would turn on their EMF meters, and it's just going crazy. The needle's just jumping like this, and they're like, "Wow, this place has high EMF." And Zach Bagans, who's sensitive, could sense that, and he would start going, you can tell, because you feel like you're paranoid in here, you feel like somebody's watching you, you start to see things out of the corner of your eyes. So I went to work, 2008, I went to work in Port Townsend, Washington at the paper mill there, and to make paper, you pour in chips into what's called a digester. Okay, it's a big tall pot. Pour in chips, and then you pour in liquor. Okay, and liquor is basically a substance that breaks down lignin. Okay, lignin is the protein that adheres the cellulose molecules together. Okay, and when the lignin is dissolved, what you're left with is strands, what we call pulp. Okay? And so what they do is when they digest a load of chips, okay, they blow it down and it goes to some separators. And in those separators, the pulp is washed. And basically they add water and then they strain out the liquor so that the liquor disappears and then the lignin stops being eaten. And when you take a sample of that, you can tell the consistency. That's what I used to do at the paper mill. I would check consistency meters and I would calibrate them depending on how they were used, how much it needed to be. And so while I was working there, when this liquor gets done, they don't dispense it. Okay, they put it through a tube that goes to a special place at the far end of the mill that's called the evaporators or evaps. Okay, and we used to call it evaps. And while there, whenever I would walk through evaps, because what they do is with the liquor, I'll just explain this really quick. With the liquor, they would take it and then they would kind of condense it down. Okay, and so white liquor is known as virgin liquor. Okay, when you put it into a digester and it digests the lignin, when you take that out and then you strain out the lignin and then you condense it down, it becomes what's known as green liquor. Okay, it's once used liquor. Then they bring that back and they put it into different digesters. And once that's been used the second time, it goes through the evaps area and it becomes black liquor, which is twice used. And you can't use it anymore. You can't use it to digest. It has lost a lot of its properties. So we would take that black liquor and we would send it up to the boiler, number 10 power boiler, or to the recovery boiler, and we would dump it in, and it would burn up. Because it's alcohol, basically. It's liquor. And so it would burn up. No waste. And so walking through evaps, a very noisy area. Very noisy. I mean, everywhere in the paper mill is noisy, but like evaps was on another level, because even with earplugs or like earphones, you still feel assaulted by noise. Okay? Like you'd know when you were getting close because the sound level would just rise. And every time I walked through that area, I felt like I was being watched. I saw what I thought were men out of the very corners of my eyes. And when I would look, nothing's there. Okay? And I mean, I think like the first like 3 or 4 times I went through the evaps area, I would spend like 10 minutes in there because I would be walking around the whole lot of it because I'd be seeing things out of the corner of my eye. I'd go chase it because I thought I'm seeing something. I'm like, what the hell am I seeing? What is this? And finally, I was talking to one of the electricians because I was an instrument tech, and the electricians and the instrument tech share the same office. And so I was talking with an electrician one day, and I was kind of, mentioning the evaps and all that kind of stuff. He goes, "Do you want to see something crazy?" And he goes, "Take your fluke, your multimeter, take it out, clip the prongs into the little clips on the back, and then turn it, to volts AC, okay, and then you plug it into these certain ports, and then you can walk in, and it becomes a portable EMF detector." And he goes, "Walk through evaps, see what you see." So I did that one day, and I walked through evaps, and it was jumping up and down like this. I mean, it was all over the place. And I had still watched Ghost Adventures because they started in 2008, and I had just started watching Ghost Adventures, and they were mentioning a lot of this stuff about how when there's really high EMF levels and blah, 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 and I started realizing, Oh, I'm a sensitive. Now it's all making sense. Now I know why I'm feeling certain things when I walk through here. It's because I'm being affected by the high EMF levels in here. So every time I walked through there, I had to steel myself and walk through, mentally prep myself with a defensive shield to walk through so that I wouldn't do that. And a lot of times what I would do, because we had to walk, because from the main paper mill, you kind of had this long channel basically from EVAPs all the way through the main part, all the way to, well, basically almost to the end of what we would call the dry end, which is where all the finished product paper and craft pulp came off the two paper machines and were put on these little elevators. Okay, so there was this huge long kind of hallway there that you could just walk almost straight down from one end of the mill to the other. So a lot of times if we were there, if we were doing something and they said, oh hey, by the way, we need to go grab a part, or you need to go grab a part out of the warehouse, then you would have to walk all the way down there. And a lot of times I would check my watch to see if it was break time, because what I would do is I'd walk into the warehouse and I'd stay there for a couple minutes until it was almost time for break time. And then I would come out of there and then I would walk all the way around the outside of the paper mill to the backside stairs to go up to the instrument shop. Because I didn't want to go back through EVAPs. Because it takes a lot to be able to go through there when you're sensitive. Most people just didn't really, they would just kind of walk through and it didn't bother them. Me, it bothered me to no end. And that's not to say that since that paper mill has been in operation since 1929, that there haven't been deaths there. Okay? Because I did see some legitimate spirits at that place. Usually they were kind of in back, out of the way places. In fact, I know for a fact that the owner of the paper mill, Charles Eisenbeis, in fact, if you've watched the Ghost Adventures back in, I think it was 2015, went to Manresa Castle, which was owned by the Eisenbeis family. Eisenbeis owned the paper mill originally. He was from Germany or Austria, one of the two. And in the 1930s, when he was building the paper mill in the early 30s, after the Nazi regime had come to power, this one guy was like, "Hey," I think it was my first or second week, and he goes, "Hey, have you seen the swastikas yet?" And I'm like, "What? What are you talking about?" And he goes, "Come here." So put on our earmuffs. We walk out into the paper mill. And he walks me back towards the EVAPS area, and we turn right before you get, so there was a bunch of pipes, and then you'd walk through a door, and then there was another antechamber, and then there was some boiler rooms, and there were some boilers, and then you walk into the EVAPS. And right before you got there, you'd turn to the left, and you'd walk down this small little channel between a pipe and the wall, and at the very back, he turns on this little headlamp, and he goes, "Swastika." And on the pipe, it had the Nazi swastika. And it said made in Germany. In 1931 or something like that. It was freaking crazy. So, steel from Nazi Germany is in the paper mill in Port Townsend, Washington. And I'm sure there's a lot of other paper mills around the Northwest that probably that date back to that time, if they were owned and operated by anybody that was remotely Austrian or German, they probably have steel from Germany in them. Okay? And it's kind of eerie when you see that, because it really brings home the fact that, before the outbreak of World War II, most people in America didn't care that Austria and Germany were basically conquering Europe and, doing what they were doing with people over there. And so it was very eerie looking at that. So, speaking of Manresa Castle, went to New Zealand, came back, My ex-girlfriend had stayed down there for a little while longer, and then she went out to the Cook Islands, got sick, ended up like very sick, came back to New Zealand, basically stayed there for about a week, and then flew home. Okay, she'd only been in the Cook Islands for about a week and a half before she got sick. And so we picked her up at the airport, we brought her back home, and she goes, hey, I want to go grab something out of our storage unit up in Port Townsend. I said, okay. So we booked in a room at Manresa Castle. We drove up there, and we stopped off at Manresa Castle, and we walked in, and we actually talked to the people, and we said, hey, we know this place is haunted. We've lived here, and this person goes, well, I can take you on a tour. And we're like, cool. So we dropped off our bags, we went upstairs into the attic, and they kind of told us the stories about the woman who committed suicide, the priest who hung himself, all the different ghosts that are said to haunt the Manresa Castle. So that night, before we went out for dinner, we went, right before we left, I pulled out a digital recorder, turned it on, and I kind of held it out in front of me like this, and I said, hi, my name is Russ, this is Liz. She was like, hi, and I said, if you wish, come to this orange light and speak into it. You can do it. And we had a fan going in the room. I'd forgotten that we did that. And then I put it down on the desk, and she was kind of like, well, don't follow us. And I said, yes. I said, we come in all respect. Okay, we just want to know if you're here. And then we left. And we came back about 2 hours later. I turned it off, put it in a bag. When I got back to Port Townsend later, I was living in a house a couple streets from a friend of mine, and I'll get to him in a second. And one day I had finally decided I was going to sit down because I was typing out a book, and I decided I was going to sit down and I was going to turn on my digital recorder. I turned the volume all the way up, I put in earbuds, and I just sat down and I started listening to it as I was typing. And every once in a while, I had a little piece of paper, I'd mark the time code and, approximate time code, and I would, mark down what I heard. Footsteps, bangs of luggage, voices. It's a working hotel, right? I'm not discounting the fact that, in February of 2011, there were a lot of, people probably still coming in every once in a while doing some of those things. Could some of them have been paranormal? Maybe. I doubt it. But there was one part where it was just silent, and all you were hearing for about 15 minutes straight was just this fan that we had going on in the room, where it was like, because it was going towards the recorder and then it was going away, and it was going towards the recorder and then it was going away. And buried in this fan noise, I heard, help her, like that. As the fan went, it was kind of like as the fan started coming towards, and then just as it started to go away, it was like, help her. And I was like sitting there typing, and then all of a sudden I went, just shut up straight. I was like, I didn't just hear that, did I? So I immediately picked it up, I paused it, and then I rewound it a little bit, and I played it. And I heard it again. I'm like, okay. So I backed it up, and I wrote down the time code, and then I listened to it about 4 or 5 times, just to make sure I wasn't going crazy. And I listened to about 5 minutes before and about 5 minutes after, and there was nothing around it. There was just that one. And I was like, so it's not like me hearing something in the fan. Okay, like my brain was just, muddled, or, I was typing something and I happened to just hear it in the fan noise because my brain was thinking it. No, this was legitimate. Like, it was an actual EVP. I could not believe it. And so I called a buddy of mine, because we were both Ghost Adventures fans, and I'd actually lived at his house for a little while before I got in this other place, and I called him up. I was like, dude, get down here. He was like, what? And I said, you've got to hear this, dude. I've got an EVP. He's like, you don't. I said, yes, I do. I said, when I came here and stayed in Manresa Castle, I have a frickin' EVP from there. And he's like, okay, I'll be down. So he came down about 10, 15 minutes later, and I backed it up, and I said, okay, there's about 3 to 4. You're going to hear the fan. It's going to be... And I said, you're going to hear about 3 or 4 of those, and then you're going to hear it. I just want you to hear it, and then I want you to say what you think it says. So I gave him the recorder. He put in the earbuds. He hit play, and he's sitting there. And he's kind of sitting there. He's like, and all of a sudden he goes, no. and I'm like, uh-huh. And so rewound it, played it for him again, and he listened to it about 5 times. And he was like, dude, that is freaky as hell. I'm like, yeah, I know, right? And if you saw the Ghost Adventures Manresa Castle episode, they were down in the dining room. I think that was up on the second or third floor. And they were down in the dining room. Okay? And while they were conducting interviews, and a lot of times when something like this happens with the Ghost Adventures crew, they go into immediate investigation mode. Like, they go try to debunk it, they go try to see if there's somebody back there, and they had a door slightly open. Okay? And it wasn't like somebody was trying to peek out or nothing. It was just like the door moved probably about half an inch to an inch. But it was just enough that it made a squeak noise in the springs, of the door. Like, it made a little bit of a squeak noise. Kind of a noise. And they were like... And even the lady who was standing there was like, there's nobody there. Like, all of our staff have gone home for the day. There's nobody there. I know there's nobody there. And so they immediately went into the thing, and of course, Zach was checking all around to make sure that there was nobody there, and there wasn't. And so he came back, and Aaron grabs a napkin, because they thought, well, maybe, like, sometimes when you have a loose door, and, like, something like air conditioning turns on, or a heater turns on, there might be a slight pressure change in one of the rooms that causes a door to swing a little bit, okay? And they would then kind of, think, okay, well, that was just what it was. But they thought, okay, so Zach grabs out a digital recorder, and he's got a camera, and he's holding it on the digital recorder, and he's holding it, and Aaron Goodwin was holding a napkin like this, okay? It was just draping down. He was holding it by the corner, pinching it, okay? So that it hung very loosely, okay? So if any kind of, like, air burst or anything like that hit it, it would move, okay? And Zach is asking some questions, and I think one of the things he goes, like, did you move this door to get our attention or something like that? And he started playing it back, because he does a lot of times when he's doing that kind of stuff, he does what he knows as live review. He'll stop, and then he'll press play, and then he'll turn the volume all the way up, and he'll listen to it. And then if he hears something, he'll actually take his microphone, which is connected to battery packs and to the cameras, and he will actually, like, hold it right next to the speaker so that you at home can hear it in real time, just like they can. And so he's holding on to the digital recorder in his hand like this. He's got the thing down. And right as he asks this question, the napkin moves ever so slightly, and you hear this voice that says, "Help me," in almost the same exact tone of voice and pitch that I caught. My buddy had called me about a week before the episode aired and said, hey, don't know if you know, but the Ghost Adventures crew came here, investigated Manresa Castle. I know you caught that EVP. You're going to want to watch this episode. I'm like, awesome. So I recorded it on my DVR, because I had a DVR at the time. My ex-wife and I had Dish, and we had the DVR. It wasn't the Hopper, but we had a DVR, and I like shot up. Stood straight up out of my chair, and I stood stock still. My hair was standing on end, and I was goose-fleshed, and I had my hairs on the back of my neck were just ding, and it was like a bolt of lightning had hit me. And my ex is going, "What is the deal?" I said, "I caught that voice. That same voice, I caught it in 2011. In the same hotel. Different floor, but the same hotel. What in the hell is going on?" And I mean, even now, when I talk about it, I mean, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. Okay? Because it was like, holy shit, that is crazy. What? And so I'd never thought of that. It was really freaking crazy. I know this is going to kind of be a little bit of a longish video. In fact, I think I'm going to stop it and I'll go into a second episode. And in that second episode, I'll finish up my paranormal experiences. And I will also talk about the Bible and its paranormal evidences and supernatural dealings, because it's out there, folks. It is. No matter what you think you know, okay? It's been caught on tape. It's been documented, okay? People have been miraculously cured of cancer. Cancer just suddenly goes into remission for no apparent reason. Not because of medicine, not because of doctors, but because people were praying for him. Standing there praying for him 24/7. Just praying. And they go in. The doctor asks him, "How you feeling?" "I'm feeling great, doc." They do a workup, and they're like, "Your cancer's gone." Wait, what? There's actual documentation of this, okay? Of miraculous things happening. And it's so funny when we have this evidence, and there's atheists out there that are like, "There's no evidence of anything supernatural or paranormal." Really? Have you seen an episode of Ghost Adventures? Honestly, you should go and watch one episode of Ghost Adventures. I guarantee you by the end of it, you'll be a believer. Because, and no matter where they've been, they've caught at least one shred of evidence of the paranormal. Be it an EVP, be it orbs, be it, pictures of unknown anomalies, be it, full-bodied apparitions. Holy crap, they have caught so much over the years. I mean, that's why now, and I think it was in like 2012 or 2013, 2014, some time frame, they switched over. It was a season before Nick Groff left. It was Nick Groff's last season. That was the season they switched over. And they basically said, okay, like, because it used to be, I'm with my name is Zach Bagans, I, never believed in ghosts until I came face to face with none. Now I'm out with my fellow investigator, Nick Groff, and our equipment tech, Aaron Goodwin, to seek out some of the most haunted places in the world, to try to catch on video what I once saw. And then they'd show some scenes, and then it would go, "These are our ghost adventures." Okay? And then they changed, in the season before Nick Groff left, to basically say, we have worked years to build up our credibility, working with some of the most renowned experts in the field, and they would show psychologists, demonologists, equipment builders, that kind of stuff, because they have worked with some of the most absolutely known people in the paranormal investigation world, okay? And they have really built a credible reputation of things that they have caught, okay? So if you think you doubt the paranormal, the existence of the paranormal or the supernatural, go watch some episodes. I would recommend go get season 3 and just watch that one season. Especially, I think it's like episode 5. It's called Poveglia Island in Italy. That will make you a believer in demons. Because that was Zach's possession. Okay? And he doesn't talk about it much anymore. But he has a tattoo on his back that he got after that experience at Poveglia Island. And it was interesting because they went to a supposedly haunted, I think it was a theater that used to be like a place for nuns, like a convent at one time. And there was some nuns that still haunt, and they don't like tattoos. People that have tattoos visible get scratched on their tattoos because the nuns don't like tattoos. And so Zach walks in, and this was like, I think it was like the 5th season, it was the 4th or 5th season, and he pulls off his shirt, and he goes, "I've got a tattoo on my back, you're not gonna like it." And he actually had like 2 or 3 scratch marks down his back, right in the center, in the middle of his tattoo, at that place. It was freaking crazy, okay? So, smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, let me know what you think of my paranormal experiences. I'm sure a lot of people are going to go,
Yeah, it's just a bunch of circumstantial evidence. You don't really know what you're talking about. Yeah.
but hey, you know what? I'll answer, because it's my experience, okay? If you've ever experienced something like that, drop a comment below, let me know what's going on in your life, and I will see you in the second episode.